Loud. Welcome to the Rezzed Sessions, EGX, Day 3. Thank you for coming. If you don't know, the Rezzed Sessions are where we talk about how games are made and topics related to that. And so next up, we've got Hannah Watts, Senior Artist at Coatsink, who's going to talk about being an artist at an indie game studio and why being a jack of all trades is not a bad thing. There'll be time for some questions at the end as well. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be here and be talking to you guys. I'm a senior artist at Coatsink. We are an indie game studio in the northeast of England, just outside of Newcastle. A little bit about me, just to yes. Sorry, I'm really terrible at mics, by the way, so I'm sorry if I just stop talking in it. But okay. So I graduated from Aberdeen's computer arts course in 2014. I believe they do actually have a stall here, so you should totally go and check them out. For a long time, I didn't really know what I wanted to be in games. I knew I wanted to work in games, but I didn't have a very good idea about specific roles. Since I graduated, I've worked for a number of smaller game studios, Coatsink, 4J. I've done a couple of freelance stuff on the side as well. I currently work as a lead artist on a project at Coatsink. So even though my role is senior artist, I'm currently leading a new project. I worked on titles like Esper 2, Chew, Augmented Empire. These are all VR titles developed at Coatsink. So yeah, just a couple of the companies that I've worked for in the last 5 years. So here's some examples. Oh, I keep changing the wrong thing. So a couple of examples of Coatsink's work. As you can see, we tend to go for quite stylized, colorful palettes. This is so when I started, it was 20 people, so it was quite small. We're now about 80, I think, so it's grown quite a bit, a large amount in the last 4 years. So why am I here? A lot of people, when they graduate or are entering the industry, they kind of want to work for the big powerhouses because they're the most well-known names. They don't necessarily know more local studios or smaller studios and what they can offer. I want to discuss being versatile and adaptive rather than being hyper-specialized. I want to touch on the fact that there might be some roles that you don't necessarily know exist. Disciplines can be broken down into even more specific roles. Certainly when I started, I didn't know the difference between a technical artist and a 3D artist and an environment artist. And how, on the flip side, being a jack of all trades isn't always a bad thing. I want to talk about kind of expanding your horizons, looking at different opportunities, how being a jack of all trades can actually, even though it sounds like a bad term, can open up new opportunities for you. And just a word of warning, it will be fairly art-centric, but I'm going to try and touch on some fundamentals that could be transferable. So when I started, I wanted to be an animator. Quickly realized I couldn't animate at all. I just do not have the patience for it. It wasn't something I enjoyed. Kind of floated for a while at university. I thought I was kind of good at painting, but not really that strong. My 3D was terrible, but I kind of enjoyed it. Level design, I was okay at. So it was actually during Dare to be Digital, which was the predecessor of Dare Academy, that I taught myself how to do 3D modeling while working on a 2D game, actually, so that was interesting. Since then, I've worked on UI, graphic design, branding, all different disciplines that have extended from my main role as an environment artist. So it is hard to be a master of anything. The saying is true, but this isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially in smaller companies, and that's something I'll kind of touch on. And that kind of leads into production art is actually very rarely perfect, so you don't have to be a master at anything at smaller companies and more bespoke studios. So it makes you, being versatile makes you a good fit for kind of teams between, under 20 people, for example, or for starting your own. So I actually did this talk a little bit like November last year, I'd say. And since then, as I said at the start, I've actually taken on a lead role. Even in the kind of 10 months since then, my skill set has had to completely adapt and change. So I now have to deal with like management of staff and mentoring, setting up the art pipeline and defining the art style, which is something I've never, had the sole responsibility of before. I have to make decisions and be accountable for them. I have to work more closely with producers and clients and learn to plan for milestones. And I also have to understand the other disciplines, pipelines, and workflows. I have to work with programmers and coders. Sorry, a little bit of a delay. I set up the animation on this slideshow like last night and clearly didn't do an amazing job. But okay, so touching on the mentoring thing, I had a couple of junior staff join the project, and it's quite a painterly texturing style, and there was a couple of people on the team that hadn't really painted before, so I introduced daily material studies. Basically, I gave them like a reference image, and in the 3 or 4 months that we've been doing this, you can see huge progression from, this is when they started, and this is kind of more recent ones by 2 of the artists on my team. So they've come like a really long way in like 3 months, and it's had a really like amazing impact on the textures in the game as well. So just following on from that, just so it's not just me talking, I wanted to mention, so I spoke to Ben Nicholas, you might know him from the Art Share on Twitter, about kind of how roles can change over time, how you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into one thing. So he just gave a little quote about how he switched from being an environment artist to a 3D concept artist. I think that role like didn't really exist when he started. He's kind of forged his own path. So yeah, just a little quote. So going off that, talking about transferable skills and other industries. So I was in like a game art Discord recently, and I had quite a lot of students, I mentioned that I was doing this talk, and I had a lot of students say that they didn't know what other career options there were outside of games. Because not everyone, when they graduate, is necessarily going to go into games, things change. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on like some other industries that use like 3D skill sets or design skill sets. I kind of wanted to touch on with people not knowing that there's other career options out there. Does that maybe create the competition that you see at the big name studios? Where it's like a real like cutthroat kind of competition to get the graduate roles. And yeah, I think it's important to know that these other options are still rewarding and challenging as well. So I did 6 months at a design agency that was like nothing to do with games. It actually taught me how to use Jira and production management and sprint planning. And so just that was stuff like I didn't get taught at uni, but has been invaluable for my career since. So yeah, off the top of my head, I listed some different industries that, I have friends that have gone into them. I've had people that have kind of worked for a few years in games and then gone into those and then maybe come back to games. So, it's completely flexible. And yeah, of course, smaller gamer studios as well. But certainly when I moved to Newcastle, I did not know that Coatsink existed at all. And it was only after I moved there that I discovered their titles and applied, and yeah, 4 years later, still there. So Lucy, which I believe might be in there you are. So I asked Lucy. Lucy is a freelance 2D artist. She's currently working on Battletoads. She's worked across multiple projects of different styles. So I asked her just to give some thoughts about how she maintains her versatility across the projects, what it's like to work with different pipelines. So yeah, I would totally agree. Like, obviously at Coatsink, we've had to work in different styles. The first thing is to like study it, like really immerse yourself in the style. Look at art direction documents, stuff like that. So just some little tips. This is primarily directed at kind of students and young professionals, but the first one is learn your fundamentals. It's often quite dry and tedious. It's not as like fancy as like dealing with like fancy new software and people like to rush and do like the really like realistic stuff, but one thing I wished I'd done when I was a student is spend time learning perspective and color and lighting theory and stuff like that. They're transferable, which is what makes it amazing. Like, they're invaluable to your careers as a creative. If you learn perspective in 2D, you then understand it in all applications. It makes new projects, jobs, opportunities a lot easier. Transferring amongst projects makes it a lot easier. And yeah, it makes you a more well-rounded professional creative. Your portfolio is going to benefit if you can demonstrate a clear understanding of the fundamentals. So this is a really amazing talk that I would recommend. If you go on the Blender Guru's YouTube, it's Alex Alvarez who runs the Neumann School. So he does it's like a 2-hour interview, I think. But this I found was a really fitting quote. So yeah, so the ability to pay attention to what you're looking at and study why it is the way it is. That doesn't just apply to realism. That applies to painting and stylized art, abstract art. You have to distill what you see into the artwork you're creating. And yeah, so the whole software argument, it's irrelevant because they're just a means to an end. Like, they're a tool set. There still has to be an artist behind that. And I think that plays into the argument. People are saying, oh, things getting more procedural. Is that gonna, are artists gonna lose their jobs? And not necessarily, because there still has to be an artist behind all of that for quality control, I'd say. Another really good video to watch. This was recommended to us by our art director. He swears by it. So Steve Houston is like a traditional painter, but he talks about growing as an artist, and it's not discipline specific. So I would absolutely recommend. It's on the Proco TV's YouTube. I would absolutely recommend just giving that a listen while you're working. And yeah, just some other resources that I found to be really useful. Schoolism. I'm like a 3D artist, but I practice painting on my iPad in my spare time because I believe it gives me that all-encompassing skill set. I learned to paint landscapes. They're not good. I would never sell them. I would never be like a concept artist, but they help me understand how landscapes are constructed. What makes an appealing image. And yeah, Draw a Box is it's like very beginner tutorials for digital painting if you did want to get into that. And then just going off the back of that, so I'm not a designer, but from working at Coatsink, we have to work really, really closely with designers. We often get handed very basic blockouts. We have to work out, what is the important parts of this level, how are we going to direct the player, what hero pieces are we going to use. Obviously as well, I have to set up a pipeline that is modular enough to work with the designers. We're not going to end up with bottlenecks. So these are just three, resources that I've found really useful, especially if anyone here works in Unity. I would absolutely recommend the prefab primer, especially now that there's like a nested prefab workflow in Unity. It's been a godsend. Oh, and yeah, oh no, I missed it. Sorry, yeah. 3 little podcasts that I would also recommend subscribing to, especially Student Art Podcast. I was very honored to be asked to go on that, and it's a great resource for, I think the guy that runs it was an ex-Sabotage student as well. So yeah, a little bit more advice. Discipline is really important for continuing to learn, and this is something I had to learn the hard way. I used to be guilty of coasting a little bit, especially through uni. And I got told by a lot of artists, daily practice, you've got to be consistent, and I kind of listened but didn't. I didn't really put it into practice. And it was only when I started really focusing on doing my own work outside of work that I actually noticed it pay off. You have to keep up. Like, the industry moves so quickly, you can't afford to fall behind, if you want to kind of carry on working in the industry. That's not to, I'm not suggesting burnout or anything. It's just have good habits, try and stay in the loop, try and stay interested in your craft, basically. And yeah, consistency is better than it's better to do like half an hour every day than it is to do a weekend of like 12 hours of solid work. It's better to have that kind of regular, even sporadic practice than just kind of binging it. And yeah, if it is difficult when you work full time, I certainly struggle. But like I said, I kind of draw on my iPad on the train to work, lunch breaks. While I'm waiting for my dinner to cook, I might open 3ds Max and do like half an hour job. And yeah, develop a routine and stick to it, kind of just what I was saying before. And yeah, be mindful of burnout because you're not going to create good art if you're working constantly. So moving on, sorry, my iPad has paused. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on inspiration and hobbies. The one critique I would give to new artists when we get applications is that we see a lot of the same things, and it's quite obvious to us that people are only looking at other games for reference. So I would suggest, I certainly recommend artists look at traditional art as well. Like, don't just look at digital. You know, go to art galleries if you can. If you know, there's quite a lot of free ones in the UK. Certainly things like film set design and theatre set design. I actually on the train here was reading documents about like color correction for film. Like I don't plan to work in film, but the stuff that I learned from it was really useful for like rendering and stuff. So yeah, I just listed some bullet points that I think, you know, are other areas that you could look at and be inspired by and draw a reference from. And yeah, just expanding from that, mood boards, I would say, is absolutely imperative. Again, it's another common mistake I see in kind of new artists is they don't look at reference while they're modeling or painting. When I start a project, I spend at least a morning collecting reference of like really, of just everything. There's this personal scene I'm working on at the moment, and I think the pure ref board that I have for it is like a couple of gigabytes because I've just completely filled it. eBay and Gumtree are really good resources for that if you're, you know, needing real life reference of like props or things. On top of that, I would absolutely recommend traveling if you can. You'll always get the best reference from taking it yourself. Yeah, read articles, books, get involved in a range of local events, watch documentaries. Yeah, just look outside of games and comics, basically. So I've kind of like poured all this information. I hope I'm not like burning through it too quickly. But yeah, how does this actually impact indie studio life? So for us, when we were a lot smaller, it cut costs significantly. So I actually did quite a lot of branding for Coatsink, which meant that we didn't have to go to an advertising agency and pay hundreds for logos and style guides and UI and stuff. It's probably not like it's not the most amazing branding. It's certainly not my speciality, but it was good enough. It can also be valuable when you have to outsource or contract work if you have an understanding. So currently I'm actually working with a contract UI artist, and because I've done UI in the past, I know what to ask for. I'm able to, it makes her life easier, it makes my life easier. I know what the programmers need, I know what deliverables to expect, I know roughly how long things take. And it also makes it you a better communicator with your team if you're multidisciplinary. I don't really work with shaders or graphical tools, but again, like I have a rough understanding that I could go to my programmers and say, I need this to do this. And we can, I knew the layman's terms basically. So yeah, it just makes everyone's life easier if you have that baseline understanding and disciplines aren't just like staying within their bubble. It's also good for if you're like a kind of new startup company, if you can advertise that your staff can work on multiple styles or multiple projects, you can then advertise that if you're looking for work for hire. And quite often, smaller studios or smaller companies rely on work for hire to kind of get the ground running. But also, on top of that, it's fun. It is fun to work in kind of different projects and different styles. You'll see a little bit later, in work, my stuff is really stylized, but outside of work, my stuff's really realistic, and it's nice to have that juxtaposition, it keeps things fresh. Sorry, can everyone hear me on the microphone? I'm aware that I'm kind of like turning that way. Cool. So I also wanted to just say a little bit about like why I personally really like working in indie development. Because I didn't want to just talk about like why it's good for the studio, but like why is it good for you as a person. You get to work with a bunch of like-minded people. Pretty much everyone at Coatsink is like a really good friend of mine. There's a couple of people in the audience, I think. But yeah, so we've been on like holiday together and stuff. It's really nice. Generally very creative work. I have always had quite a bit of a say in how things are, and if you think that things should go in a certain direction, there's normally that room to experiment and explore ideas. Yeah, opportunities to take ownership. So especially on Shadowpoint, which is our most recent release, it was a VR title, there were a lot of areas where I was partnered with another artist. We got to direct how that looked and felt. Like, we did have input from the art director, but if we were like, oh, this building would look really cool, they were like, yeah, totally go for it. So that was really nice, to have your imprint like that on a game. And yeah, room to learn is probably key. Like, when I joined Coatsink it was 4 years ago, actually this month, I was really junior, and I could model and I could texture, but since then, I've learned a lot about game engines. I hadn't really worked in engine before. I've learned about pipelines and management, and yeah, kind of all the stuff I touched on before, I wouldn't have got if I was just learning by myself. And yeah, obviously I'm here. I am a dev. I'm not normally, I'm normally in the office. We do have a marketing team, but smaller teams means that quite often devs will get sent to events like this, and obviously that's great for like meeting new people, meeting potential new publishers or staff, or yeah. Also, it's fun. I like coming to events. And yeah, opportunities to get promoted as studio grows. So if you join a studio kind of early on, there's always potential that you could end up in a lead position or in a senior position, and continue to have a say and an impact on the games that are released. Oh yeah, and I can't speak for everyone, but most of the indie studios I've done work for or know of are kind of anti-crunch. Like, I've never really had to crunch in my life, maybe the odd weekend, but yeah, I've never done like the work till 10 p.m. for 3 months thing. So yeah, when I was looking for just like content for this talk, I actually discovered this tweet. I just thought it kind of summed up what I've been talking about. And I was kind of the same. Like, I didn't really have a style, especially when I started. And you see a lot of people asking like, how am I going to develop a style? All these illustrators are so like recognizable. But yeah, in production, you kind of just need to match the style given to you. Like, if you're working on an IP that isn't yours, you have to often match like brand guidelines quite strictly, and they're going to review your stuff and make sure that it ticks every box. So having the ability to transition, as Lucy discussed in her quote, is key. So yeah, I just wanted to show quickly just the kind of all the different styles I've worked in, just to kind of illustrate how all over the place my career has actually been. So yeah, so in graphic design and branding for Augmented Empire, this was the first title I actually had to do any branding for. I didn't know how anything about printing stickers or screen printing bags or anything. Like, that had to be completely learned on the fly and then go out for print. Oh, I think there's a little bit of lag. There we go. And yeah, just some more branding stuff. The Chinese logos were interesting because obviously I don't speak Chinese, but I had to translate the logos and then work out, check that they read okay, because I don't think the language reads the same as English. So that was really interesting to do. But yeah, so just some more branding stuff I've done for Coatsink and freelance stuff as well. And then yeah, this is my forte, the 3D environment. So yeah, so that's a bunch of different Coatsink titles, quite different color palettes and styles. So this is Shadowpoint. This is our most recent title, and this was so this is what we had. I had a little bit more control in how it looked. This is actually a really interesting title to develop art for because we often had 60,000 verts for the entire level, and that was it. That was maximum. So it was interesting trying to create these huge landscapes with such a hard budget. But yeah, so this is a VR title on the Oculus Quest. And then in comparison, that's more my realistic stuff. So again, completely different to the stuff I do in work, completely different pipeline. Some UI design. Again, I'm not a specialized UI designer, but I had to do some UI design for Augmented Empire, which was like an RPG in VR. And then they suspect nothing. And this involved implementing an engine as well and setting up the functionality. Okay, and this, I really hope it works. This is an example of why I didn't become an animator. So this is a 2D animation I did at 4 in the morning at a global game jam. It's quite shameful. I hope it plays. Johnny, you might remember this. Yeah, not my proudest work, but oh well. So yeah, that's another good thing as well. Like it makes like game jams really fun. We at Coatsink do global game jam every single year. We're actually booking our site for January currently. So yeah, it's a good experience. So yeah, continuing to learn. Obviously, I touched on kind of discipline and routine. So here are just some resources that I personally use and think are really useful. Obviously, YouTube and Twitch are really, really good for like a lot of prolific artists. You have content and tutorials and demos and stuff. A lot of these didn't exist when I was at uni. They were starting to come around. So I'm really quite envious of like the really young artists now who have access to all this. Obviously, ArtStation have just released their learning section. Udemy has been around for a while. Discord and Facebook groups. I actually have only just started using Discord over maybe the last 4 months, and it has been really, really good for like immediate feedback on things. Because Facebook's okay for feedback, but if I had like a really technical question, I often didn't have anyone to turn to, and Discord has been really, really good for that. And yeah, online school, Schoolism, I would absolutely recommend. That's run by an artist there, Bobby Shu. Really, really good for if you're wanting to like learn, if you are a painter or if you're wanting to learn painting on the side, but they also do stuff about like photo bashing and illustration and life drawing and stuff. And then obviously Gama Sutra is really good for postmortems. We have looked at a lot of Gama Sutra articles for developing our pipeline for our current project. And then finally, paid mentorships. The Mentor Coalition is a relatively new site run by a couple of different artists. There's material artists and lighting artists, I think. And you can subscribe to them for like a couple of $100s, and it's like having a tutor, basically, which is actually something I want to investigate going forward. So yeah, I really hope I didn't like run through that too quickly. I was like really conscious of time. But yes, we are currently actually looking for some roles at Coatsink. There's like some design positions and art positions, QA and programming, I think. Yeah, I think that's all. So yeah, if you fancy a change of scenery, just get in touch. And yeah, if you have any questions. Thank you.
Hello. Oh yeah.
Hi.
So in regards to like being a sort of jack of all trades, where do you both sort of find the confidence in being able to sort of both sort of advertise yourself professionally as being able to do it, and also like just do it, like I'm good enough at this to be able to be paid for it, kind of?
I mean, I still actually struggle with that. I think I'm very guilty of having imposter syndrome. I think you kind of just have to put yourself out there. Like, I was really nervous doing this talk, even though I've done talks before, and I was even saying to my friends, I was like, please can you give me some quotes so it's not just my opinions? So I would say, like, I don't think it ever really goes away, and I think that's a good thing. I think you should, you know, critique yourself and think, like, am I doing, you know, the best I can do? But I would say as well, it comes with time. Working at a smaller company, having to have made decisions before, you kind of just get used to putting your foot down a little bit. So, does that answer your question?
Hi. So I was wondering if I'm in my third year on my art course. Would you say it'd be easier or maybe harder working for smaller or getting a job as a graduate for like smaller or indie studios?
I think it depends on your portfolio. We've had interns at Coatsink before, and we tend to, again, look for portfolios that can demonstrate the fundamentals, as I was saying. So if you've got like a good eye for color and like a good eye for taste as well, we know that we can you can teach technical skills to anyone really, but you can't always teach like a good taste to people. So I can't really comment on like AAA, having not worked in it, but I'd say yeah, if you have a strong enough portfolio and you seem like someone that we could work with, you've got a good chance.
Hello. Thanks for the talk.
Thank you.
My question is, do you know any useful websites or organizations for someone who is looking for sort of more indie studios?
I'd say I would always say Twitter is quite good. I think the indie development sphere on Twitter is certainly what I hear about people. I don't know of any like actual websites or forums. Maybe Reddit is probably a good one. I think they have like an indie dev subreddit. But I would definitely say Twitter is where I hear about all the different companies and new startups and stuff.
Hey.
Hi.
You mentioned working on your personal projects after work and building discipline. Do you have any tips and tricks for that, or like any habits to develop on that?
I would always say when starting, it's quite good to time box. Like if you know that you're someone that like puts stuff off, it's quite good to be like, okay, at like 6 o'clock, I'm gonna sit down and I'm not gonna get off my computer until like 7:30 or something. That's normally how I would initially start it, and then after a while, I think it's like going to the gym. Like you find yourself in that routine after a while, but you do have to kind of force yourself if you're not used to it. Like there are some nights I come home and I really can't be bothered, and I sit down, and then I'm like, no, I should get up and do work. But yeah, there will still be like a bit of a battle with it, especially if you work like a busy job. But yeah, it's not really like something I can give tips for, because it's like it depends on you as a person, I guess. Oh, actually, no, sorry, just to go back on that, I just thought of a good point. One of my friends said that he struggled to do personal work until he started streaming and casting his screen, and that forced him to like knuckle down and work, because you can't really go on Facebook if you've got people watching. So.
Another question over here.
Hello, Hannah. That was
Hi.
a really good talk, by the way.
Thank you.
For that. We're Abertay students as well, so we're kind of going down the same sort of route as you. Sorry about the accent, folks. I'm from Glasgow. Can't help it. What's your top 3 cross-disciplinary skills for like an undergraduate? Like, do you think we should be prioritizing getting into design or programming or audio even?
I think when it those high-level disciplines, I think you would have to specify. So when I was talking about cross-disciplinary, I was talking like more just within art, but I certainly think like designers that have scripting experience are really useful, or like designers with narrative experience and stuff. Obviously, can't comment too much on like audio and programming not being one, but yeah, I think if you were looking to start your own company, it's good to be able to pitch in to, like with different things. I think you do hear of stories where people have to wear many hats, like when they're starting out. So.
Doesn't look like there's any more. So thank you very much to Hannah.
Well, thank you for coming.